UConn survived and BYU thrived, at least in the second half of yet another epic Jimmy V Classic at the Madison Square Garden on Tuesday night.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. I'm your host, Andy Patton. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and you can place your NFL live bets all year long. Well, folks, UConn survived against Florida, who is now down to 4 losses already on the season for the defending champs. No bad losses, but still not a pretty sight for Todd Golden's team. We'll talk about that game and BYU absolutely stunning Clemson in the first game of the Jimmy V Classic, down 21 at half. They come back, they win that basketball game. Tremendous stuff from AJ Dybantsa. We'll talk about those two games. We'll also talk about Michigan continuing their dominance with a big win over Villanova. We also had some Big Ten matchups, including Indiana hanging 113 points on Penn State. We'll talk about that, and we'll close out the show getting you ready for some of Wednesday night's action. Some more Big Ten games, including a really fun one between two very good teams in Wisconsin and Nebraska, plus a chance for Purdue, to potentially bounce back with the matchup against Minnesota. But let's start this thing off talking about the last game in the Jimmy V Classic on Tuesday night between the 5th-ranked UConn Huskies and the 18th-ranked Gators of Florida. UConn survives 77-73, the final score. And this thing was a battle all game long, as you would expect from the 3 most recent national champions. Of course, UConn the first 2 years, and then Florida last year. They also played each other last year in a second round game in the NCAA tournament. And this thing was close throughout. Like we said, it was choppy at times, a lot of fouls called in this one, got a little ugly, but never got out of hand for either team. Florida never fully lost control. UConn never, it was a 5, 6, 7 point game at most, pretty much all the way through this contest. UConn finally got some momentum later in the game. And once they got a lead in the middle of the second half, they kind of never relinquished. But again, Florida never went away. They hung in this thing. The last couple of minutes were constantly foul. UConn hitting their free throws. Florida coming down, getting a quick bucket. The amount of times that Jay Billis said the phrase good on Florida for getting a quick basket here. He probably said that 5 times in the final 3 minutes of this game because Florida kept getting quick baskets and then pressing. And then UConn would eventually break the press and get fouled and make the free throws to push it to a 4-point game or a 5-point game. And then Florida would score and then rinse and repeat until there were about 5 seconds to go. UConn inbounded the ball to Jaden Ross. Don't know why. He was the one who got the ball in the corner. He ended up losing the ball out of bounds. And now Florida's inbounding the ball in front of their basket on the sideline with 5 seconds to go, or 9 seconds to go, down 3. They had a chance. They had a real chance to get the ball in. They could have gone for a quick 2 and potentially given them another possession, or they could have gone for a 3 to tie this thing up. Instead, they don't even get the ball in. 5-second call. I don't know why the cameras were on Todd Golden afterwards, because you knew he was going to explode. He did. Just flabbergasting that Florida couldn't find a way to even get the ball inbounded on that play. UConn takes over, get the ball into solo ball. Boogie Flan makes what actually looked like a pretty good defensive play, knocked the ball loose. That ended up calling a foul on it. When you look at it, he does get the ball, but he also does get the hand. As a little ticky-tack, it felt like the refs were kind of just geared up to call a foul because that's the circumstance that they were in. Regardless, solo ball does enough at the line, gives them a 4-point lead. Florida does not come back from that. Again, Florida now 5-4 on the year, and it's not like any of their losses are bad. Their losses are to Arizona, the number 1 team in the country, Duke and UConn, 2 top 5 teams in the country. TCU, obviously the most notable loss on their resume by a pretty considerable amount. But TCU is not exactly a bad team. The problem is that Florida they needed to win some of these games. They needed to win at least probably 2 of them to feel really good, at least one of them, because now their best win is Miami. And no disrespect, I actually like Jay Lucas's team. They're 33rd at KenPom, but when you have a schedule, when you're coming off a national championship and you schedule top 10 teams like Arizona, Duke, and UConn, you don't feel good about not beating any of them. And that's where Florida's at right now. Tough offensive night for them. They shot just 27% from 3. They out-rebounded UConn, had 40 boards, 16 of them offensive, but 42% from the field, 27% from 3. Xavier Lee, Jay Bilas kept saying best game of his Florida career, and I think he's probably right, but he's still 1 of 7 from 3. Like, he still is just not able to provide that floor spacing and outside shooting that Florida desperately needs from their guards. And Boogie Flan was in foul trouble for so much this game, and they didn't have enough. Even with Tommy Hauck scoring 18, even with Alex Condon having a nice game, 14, 9, and 4, just not enough for Florida. They got George Washington next. By the way, not a gimme. George Washington 60th at KenPom right now, but this is as much of a must-win game as there can possibly be in mid-December for a team like Florida. Meanwhile, on the UConn side of things, they're up to 9-1 on the year. Their lone loss also coming to the Arizona Wildcats, 8 of 18 from 3 for UConn as a team in this one. Solo Ball was the star, 19 points, but man, every time I watch UConn, I come away more and more impressed with the play of Malachi Smith. Malachi Smith transferred from Dayton, a star player for the Flyers, did not have to transfer to a situation where he would be coming off the bench, chose to do so, and has been such an unbelievably valuable part of this UConn team. This is the second game against a high-quality opponent where Malachi Smith has had 9 assists and 1 turnover off the bench. He did it against Illinois. He did it again Tuesday night against Florida. He's just is such a difficult read for opposing defenses because he's so quick and he's so jittery and he's always got his eyes up and he's a tremendous passer. He sees passing lanes that he had a bounce pass to Terrace Reed that just like led him perfectly into a little left-handed layup, and Micah Handlogden could not do anything other than foul Reed in that situation. And that was, credit to Reed for catching it, but that was a beautiful pass. Malachi Smith has been I think one of the biggest issues for UConn last year was depth and not having the backup guard play they needed. Malachi Smith was a tremendous addition for this team, and he looked every bit the part on Tuesday night. For UConn, again, like we said, 9-1 on the year. They got Texas coming up next on Friday, another nice chance for Danny Hurley's team to pick up another quality win in the non-conference slate. We got to talk about this Clemson BYU game, folks. This was the first game of the Jimmy V Classic. Obviously, UConn Florida was the headliner, but man, Clemson BYU was a blast. Clemson was up 43-22 at halftime. And if you folks are followers of the great Jake Hatch, who hosts the Locked On Cougars podcast, he had some event that he had to go to on Tuesday night, and he was able to watch the first half of this game and then left and went to his event with his BYU team down 21 points at halftime. And he said, imagine my surprise when I looked at my phone and saw that BYU came back, and he went ahead and watched the second half. And I bet he just had a joy of a time watching that second half, knowing that his team was going to come back and win, because it was a really fun half to watch for everybody on the planet except for Clemson fans. BYU just put the absolute clamps on the Tigers, held them to very few points in that second half. They ended up finishing with 21, but they had 14 or 15 minutes into that second half before they went on a little run. Just dominant defensive stuff, but really it was AJ Dybantsa. He took over this basketball game in the second half, similarly to what he did against UConn, except, of course, BYU didn't actually come all the way back and beat UConn in that game. They did manage to make it happen here. I guess I should tell you how it happened in case you missed this. It was 64 all with 5.5 seconds left. BYU calls a timeout. They come up with some play, some plan of what they're going to do. Before the ball gets inbounded, Brad Brownell for Clemson calls a timeout. And then when BYU does inbound the ball, they made what I thought was a tremendously dumb decision. They inbounded the ball. They got it to Rob Wright. He got across half court, and then he called timeout. There was like 1.3 seconds left on the clock. was like, yeah, I understand advancing the ball, but to waste 4 of the 5 seconds that you had, and maybe Coach Young was thinking, hey, they called a timeout. Maybe they're on to what we're going to do. We're going to throw like another wrinkle at them. I'm not sure, but I thought, man, this is a coaching decision that's going to be heavily questioned if BYU doesn't win this game. But then they inbounded the ball to Rob Wright, and he chucked up a 3 and drilled it in ball game. And that was it. BYU won the game. So no more questioning Coach Kevin Young. Clearly the plan worked, or at least a plan worked. They got themselves the W. We mentioned Dybantsa, career high in points, rebounds, and assists for the 6'9" freshman, 28 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 9 of 17, 9 of 10 from the stripe in this one. And what BYU did so effectively in the second half of this game was utilizing Dybantsa in ball screens, and Clemson their ball screen coverage was flat out awful in this game. And a huge credit to Dybantsa for not just, he's getting this reputation of being a free throw merchant and always looking to score and looking to get fouled and get to the line. And he went 9 of 10 from the line, but his passing in this game was excellent. And if you are somebody who is, maybe a fan of a team that's going to pick in the lottery in the NBA, or are an NBA draft aficionado, or just haven't seen enough of Dybantsa but have heard the passing, watch this game, because he is a much more gifted passer than I think he gets credit for. And I think this game really showcased a lot of that. Also, again, not a game Clemson's going to want to rewatch for that exact same reason, but really fun stuff from BYU. Should also mention that BYU went on a 16-4 run to begin the second half, and the only thing that could slow BYU down was their starting center, Cadeau, who threw down a dunk in transition that broke the rim, and there was a lengthy delay as they attempted to fix the rim at Madison Square Garden. And I really thought, oh, that's it. BYU came out gunning in the second half. They picked up a ton of momentum, and that momentum screeched to a halt with the delay. I didn't think they would be able to come back and keep that momentum going. Again, big credit to Dybantsa, Coach Young, Rob Wright, and Cadeau for being able to find a way to get BYU a much-needed win here after a really ugly first half. All right, folks, Michigan picked up a 6th consecutive 25-point margin of victory, absolutely throttling Villanova in this one, particularly on the glass. We're going to talk about that and a few other results from Big Ten teams coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, NFL Sundays, they move fast. And one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. And that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as soon as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift, whether that's a receiver getting hot, a defense tightening up, a momentum flip after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into those moments. There's live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. Player props update as a guy heats up, and you can bet the next touchdown, drive results, totals, and more. Going back to Wednesday's previews, we'll get to that to close out the show, but Wisconsin, 1.5-point favorites on the road against Nebraska. We'll touch on that game, a few others as well. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, folks, segment 2, still AJ Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast. And folks, if you're a true diehard college basketball fan, and those of you who are hanging out live right now on a Tuesday at little after midnight on the East Coast, you are truly diehards. And the Everyday All Access tier, that is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with myself and Isaac, all access episodes, exclusive newsletters, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to lockedoncollegebasketball.supercast.com to join the Everydayer program and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. All right, folks, moving on to some other games taking place on Tuesday that we want to recap. Villanova went to Michigan to take on the Wolverines, and I got to feel like they were not feeling great going into that game after Michigan has just dominated every one of their opponents recently, and it was the same exact story once again in Ann Arbor. Dusty May's team picks up a comfortable 89-61 victory over the Wildcats. They were up 30 at halftime, coasted to a 27-point win from their 28-point win from there. 6 straight wins for the Wolverines by 25 or more points. And again, That may be, you may look at that with a grain of salt if they were playing a bunch of teams in the 300s at KenPom, but this included wins against a bunch of high-level teams. I mean, we're talking Auburn, San Diego State, we're talking Gonzaga, we're talking Villanova. Like, they beat some really good teams, and also Rutgers in this stretch of basketball here. And again, the way they did it in this one, dominating on the glass. 20 rebound advantage for Michigan. They had 53 rebounds in this game, and 15 of them on the offensive glass. It wasn't even the prettiest offensive performance for Michigan. They didn't shoot it all that well. Heck, Yaxel Lendeberg, 9 points. He had 4 steals, 3 boards, 2 assists, but he's 2 of 6. Again, Yaxel's so valuable because even his off nights, he's still contributing in so many different ways. But yeah, he was not his typical self, and yet still a very comfortable victory for the Wolverines. Elliot Cadeau had 18 points, 4 assists, was 4 of 8 from 3. Aday Mara, 11 points, 8 boards, 2 blocks, 4 of 6 shooting for him. Michigan mainly dominated, though, on defense, held Nova to just 34% from the field and 27% from 3. Devin Askew for Villanova had 18 points off the bench, 15 of them in the first half, which, by the way, Villanova scored 23 in the first half, and Askew had 15 of them as a player coming off the bench. I suspect there are not too many games where a player coming off the bench scores basically 2/3 of his team's points in the first half. It's not a good stat. It's not a good group to be a part of, but that is what Devin Askew was able to do for Villanova in this one. Next up for Michigan, they are at Maryland. We'll see if they can keep their streak going against the Terps. That is on Saturday. Next up for Villanova, they are hosting Pitt out of the ACC, also on Saturday. Another good result in the Big Ten here. Good if you are a fan of the Fighting Illini, I should say. They won at Ohio State, went to Columbus, picked up a nice victory, 88-80, the final score here. And this is a very good Ohio State team. Like, this is a quality win for Illinois. Obviously, Illinois is 13th. Ohio State is unranked, so you'd expect that they would win this game. They were favored to win this game, but road games in any conference are not easy, and Ohio State is not a pushover team by any stretch. But the Illini offense was just outstanding in this game. 41% from 3 as a team, 29 of 32 from the free throw line, 91% from the stripe. That really helped get it done for this team. Keaton Wagler, freshman, 23 points, 5 assists, 3 of 5 from 3 for him. David Mirkovich had 22 and 9, was also 4 of 5 from 3. The Illini now 8-2, and their only losses on the season are to Alabama and the aforementioned UConn Huskies. Next up for Illinois is a game against Nebraska on Saturday. We'll talk more about the undefeated Cornhuskers later in the show. Ohio State, meanwhile, falls to 7-2. They have now lost 2 of their last 3 games after losing to Pitt the week of Thanksgiving. That's a rough loss for Ohio State. Bruce Thornton, incredible game for him. 34 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, and a pair of steals. He was 6 of 9 from 3, but the rest of his team, 3 of 19, not getting it done for the rest of those Buckeyes. Next up for Ohio State, they host West Virginia on the 13th, and the next week they play North Carolina on the 20th. Final game to talk about here among Big Ten teams. Penn State went to Indiana, and Penn State was a team that had not played really anybody in a competitive schedule up to this point, and it showed. It showed in this game. Indiana obviously had some struggles earlier this week and just took everything out on Penn State. 113-72 was the final score. Penn State, I think they had 58 in the first half, or Indiana did 58 in the first half. Just a dominant offensive performance from the Hoosiers. And I should say more specifically, a dominant offensive performance from Lamar Wilkerson. Goodness gracious. Lamar Wilkerson, 44 points from the Sam Houston State transfer. He also had 4 assists, 4 boards, and 3 steals. And yes, really wish he could have found a way to get a 4th steal. So it'd be 44, 4, 4, and 4. But alas, only 3 steals for Lamar Wilkerson in a game where he shot a blistering hot 10 of 15 from 3. That's a good shooting. That's a great shooting performance for an entire team. For Lamar Wilkerson himself to shoot 10 of 15 from 3 is absurd. The rest of the team was not quite as good. I guess they were 7 of 16. Still pretty darn good considering the team shot 55%, 17 of 31 as a team. 30 assists, just 10 turnovers. There are a lot of different stats in this Indiana game that would make your jaw drop. But Lamar Wilkerson was the absolute star. Got to give a shout out to Reed Bailey coming off the bench, 18-5 for him. And then Connor Way had 17 points, 7 assists, and shot 7 of 9 from the field. Hoosiers 8-2 on the year. They end their 2-game losing streak, which of course that agonizing loss to Louisville last week. So they're 8-2 on the year. They got Kentucky next in Lexington. I'm excited about this game. Indiana has some momentum. Kentucky does not, although they won on Tuesday night. It was against NC Central, so that's not that big of a deal. I'm excited to see how that one plays out on Saturday in Lexington. Penn State, meanwhile, also 8-2, but again, not all 8-2 records are created the same. Penn State's best win is against Navy, who's 198th at Ken Palm as I record this right now. Next up for Penn State is a home date with Michigan State on Saturday. I think we'll start to see exactly where Penn State's going to fall in the Big Ten after that game. Well, folks, we're staying with some Big Ten talk as Purdue gets a chance to bounce back from last week's hideous loss to Iowa State at Mackey. We're going to talk about that and 3 other big-time matchups taking place on Wednesday. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, let's talk about something that most men, well, I don't really like to bring it up, but they absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life stress, it doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugiet Ready is next-generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body, so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. You connect with a board-certified doctor online and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Most men are ready in about 15 minutes on average, so you can stay present, stay confident, and in control when that moment is right. And if you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet Ready, feel confident, feel present. All right, folks, segment 3, still AJ Patton, still the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. And we're moving away from recapping what was a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday, specifically at the Madison Square Garden with a couple of epic games. But there were some good games going on with some Big Ten teams as well. And now we're going to look ahead to Wednesday's slate. Not as exciting of a slate of games, admittedly, on Wednesday, but I did find 4 games that I think are worth previewing here. 2 matchups in the Big Ten, and then a couple of pretty interesting mid-major matchups as well. First up, we got Minnesota going on the road to take on the 6th-ranked Boilermakers of Purdue. This game is at 7 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. FanDuel favoring Purdue by 18.5. The main storyline here is pretty obvious. Purdue bouncing back from that ugly loss they took last week against Iowa State, dropped them from number 1 in the AP poll to number 6 as Iowa State climbed up to number 4. UConn also jumped ahead of Purdue, as well as, of course, Arizona, Michigan, and Duke moving up 1 spot. And Purdue doesn't get beat like that very often. They do not get beat like that at home really ever. It's extremely rare for that to happen. A big shout out to Iowa State, fantastic team that was underranked coming into that game and is now finally more appropriately ranked after that destruction of Purdue. I suspect Matt Painter is going to have his team ready to roll. And frankly, they're just a significantly more talented, more deep program than Minnesota at this point. And that's not even really disrespect to Minnesota. They've been fine. And they're going to get better. I think Nico Medved's a good coach. I think that this program is trending in the right direction. They already beat Indiana, one of the better teams in the Big Ten. They beat them on Wednesday, but before that, they had lost 3 in a row. And those 3 losses in a row, while not, again, to discredit these programs, as somebody who follows the WCC very closely, I think San Francisco and Santa Clara are very, very, very good. But Minnesota should not be losing to both of those teams. They also lost to Stanford. So those 3 losses looming large for Minnesota. They respond by getting that win over Indiana, and now they got to go to Mackey and try to take down one of the preseason title favorites in Purdue. Meanwhile, Purdue, of course, already 1-0 in league play after beating Rutgers. They're going to come into this game pissed off The main thing they got to do is just figure out a way to slow down Cade Tyson. Cade Tyson has been tremendous for the Golden Gophers this year, averaging just under 22 points a game, also about 5 rebounds, 2 assists, shooting 37% from 3. I'll give you my predictions for each of these games. 18.5-point line for Purdue. They are going to win, and they are going to not cover that spread. I think Minnesota is going to, I think it's going to be close to the spread. I mean, I think it's gonna be like a 15-ish point game, but I don't think Minnesota is going to get fully blown out in this basketball game. So give me Minnesota to cover, but give me Purdue, of course, to win this one. Next up, probably the most intriguing matchup of Wednesday, Wisconsin going on the road to take on the 23rd ranked Nebraska Cornhuskers, 9 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. FanDuel favoring the Badgers, the road team, and the unranked team to win this one. 1.5-point line right now at FanDuel. Nebraska is undefeated. So we're talking about an undefeated top 25 team at home and the unranked, not undefeated team going to their house is actually favored. That is a bit of a surprise, although Wisconsin is a very, very good team. And Nebraska, while they are 9-0, I do think there's some question about some of their resume. And it's not that they played a bad schedule. It's that some of the teams they have beat, just we're not really sure how good they are. Oklahoma, they might be all right. They got smacked around by Gonzaga, but more concerningly, they got smacked around by Arizona State quite recently. Creighton has just looked flat out not good this year, so that win doesn't look nearly as good as I think you would have hoped that it would be if you are Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska. They also have a win over Kansas State, which that hasn't aged very well either. And then New Mexico, who we'll talk about in a second. Decent team, but that was expected to be your 4th best win, and now it's looking like maybe your 2nd or 3rd best win. That's not so good for Nebraska. That's not a knock on Nebraska at all. They didn't do anything wrong. When you scheduled these games, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They haven't lost to anybody. They're one of just 8 undefeated teams remaining in college basketball, and Rick Mast has been a superstar for them. 18.5 points, 6 boards per game. Meanwhile, Wisconsin 7-2 on the year, but their losses are pretty quality losses. They lost to BYU in a neutral site game that was in Salt Lake City. They lost to TCU in San Diego. They're 1-0 in the Big Ten, having beat Northwestern in their first game of conference play. They also have wins over Marquette and Providence. Again, wins that you would have hoped would have aged a little bit better, but alas, that is where we are at. Before Wisconsin, they have 2 20-point per game scorers. That is incredibly rare. John Blackwell and Nick Boyd both just over 20 points per game. This should be a very, very fun matchup. I'm excited by the Nolan Winter versus Rick Mast in the front court. I think there's a lot of fun here. I do think Wisconsin wins. I do think that they end Nebraska's undefeated season, and I think that they cover. Again, it's a 1.5-point line, so I'm basically just picking Wisconsin to win by any margin other than 1 point. I think they're going to get it done. And I think it's not even exactly an upset, even though it would be an unranked team beating a ranked team on the road. I do think Wisconsin's going to win this one. 2 more games to get to. Next up, we said we're going to talk about New Mexico. They're going on the road to take on VCU. Fun Mountain West versus A10 battle here, 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN+. FanDuel favoring the Rams by 9.5. 2 teams in the top 100 at KenPom, although VCU is much higher right now, 41st. New Mexico is 7-2 on the year. They did pick up recent wins over Mississippi State and Santa Clara, but there are 2 losses. One of them, of course, to Nebraska. The other one is at New Mexico State. Not a great loss in terms of the opponent, but a road game against a heated rival is a more understandable loss for New Mexico, now coached by Eric Olin, who is the head coach at UC San Diego, that nearly knocked off Michigan in the first round of the Big Dance last year. Meanwhile, VCU is 6-3, but all their losses are, quote, good losses. They lost to Utah State, who's 38th at KenPom. They lost to Vanderbilt, who is 8th at KenPom, and they lost to NC State, who is 37th. We're going to talk about them in just a second as well. Meanwhile, for VCU, they also have nice wins over Virginia Tech and South Florida. I'm predicting VCU to win this one because they are at home. I think that they got the juice to get this done. I've really liked watching freshman Nick Lewis and the way that he has played in Oregon transfer Jadrian Tracy as well. I think not only does VCU win, I think they cover that 9.5-point spread. And the last game here, Liberty going on the road to take on NC State, Will Wade's Wolfpack. This game also at 7 Eastern time on the ACC network. FanDuel favoring the Wolfpack by 11.5. in this one. Liberty is 6-2 on the year, but their best win is Florida Atlantic, who is 116th at KenPom. However, Liberty is one of the most effective offensive teams in college basketball. Their effective field goal percentage, according to KenPom, is 62.8. That is the third best in college basketball. They're going up against another incredibly efficient offensive team in NC State, who is 15th in effective field goal percentage, according to KenPom. So literally two of the 15 most efficient offenses in the sport squaring off at 7 Eastern time on ACC Network on Wednesday. What more could you possibly ask for if you are a college basketball junkie? This is going to be a blast. NC State 6-3 on the year. No really bad losses. Seton Hall is looking like a loss that's not that bad. I think the Hall is a pretty good squad this year. Texas and at Auburn are their other losses. Darian Williams has been, as you would have expected, Darian Williams to be for a Will Wade team, 16.5 points, about 5 boards, 3.5 assists per game for him. I think NC State wins this one. Of course, they are at home against a team that is lower than them at KenPom and that hasn't been super tested. I also think NC State covers. In fact, I think this might be a blowout. 11.5-point line, obviously picking them to cover means you're kind of predicting a blowout or at least like a comfortable win, but I'm thinking like NC State might win this thing by 25. Like I'm not a huge believer in Liberty. I think that their numbers are inflated by a relatively weak schedule. And while I think that NC State still has some issues that they're working out, I think they're going to take a lot of those issues out on the Flames in this game on Wednesday night. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everydayers as well. Isaac will be back with you all on Thursday's show, and then he and I will be back with you all on Friday to get you ready for an incredible weekend of hoops. We've already talked about a few of those great games that are taking place. Gonzaga UCLA is another one. It is going to be a tremendous slate, and we'll get you ready for that on Friday. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until next time, peace out.